Hello once again, MMA fans on YouTube. I'm going to come do UFC 72 predictions here. Victory. It's going to be in Belfast, Ireland, so it's going to be on pay-per-view now. Spike decided not to air it. They felt like the Martin Kampman, Rich Franklin main event was a more marketable main event as opposed to the Yushin Okami replacement. I think Okami is a more legitimate title contender. He adds more legitimacy to Rich Franklin if he's going to go on and eventually maybe face the champion, whether it be Anderson Silva or Nate Marquardt. So I don't know what the officials at Spike are thinking with that, but I'm going to pay to watch it. It's going to be on, I think, mid-afternoon. So I'm going to do 5 fights in this prediction segment here, so I hope you enjoy them. First fight I'm going to do is scheduled to be a prelim fight, but it's going to be Ed Herman against Scott Smith. Smith coming off his loss against Patrick Cote, UFC 67. I was at that event, so I got to see that fight firsthand. Didn't look like the same Scott Smith we saw against Pete Dragosel. The crazy exchanges, a lot of the fist action just wasn't happening for him. And taking on Ed Herman, who's more of a ground specialist, ground and pounder, submission guy, coming off his win against Chris Price. Chris Price didn't make weight by a lot, but still Ed Herman took the fight, got to cut his hair after the fight like he wanted. It's going to be a good fight. Ed Herman's first true test in the UFC. Don't consider, well, we all thought that Jason MacDonald was going to be a cakewalk for him, but he ended up getting submitted there. Then he goes on, submits Chris Price rather easily. Now he's fighting Scott Smith, so take that back. It's going to be a good fight, competitive fight if it goes to the ground. Smith does have some ground skills. It's going to be a competitive fight on the ground, but Ed Herman's got some nice transitions as we saw in his last fight. Smith has definitely heavy hands, is a really good striker on his feet. He holds the edge there, so I think if it stays up, he could possibly give Ed Herman some problems, but I think Ed Herman's a pretty tough guy, kind of hard to knock out. But this looks like one of those fights that's destined to go to a decision, and if it does, I think Ed Herman will get it. He's an aggressive guy. Smith in his last fight looked tentative, didn't seem to want to pull the trigger much, but if it goes to a decision, Ed Herman. On to the next fight, another fight between 185 pounders, both guys coming off losses in their last UFC fights. Rory Singer against Jason the Athlete MacDonald, fresh off of his loss against Rich Ace Franklin, who's also fighting in the main event on this card. Very similar styles here, tall, rangy middleweights. Not much in terms of striking. I give the striking edge to Singer. Actually, he does have some knockouts on the feet. Even knocked out Wilson Govea, who's shown that he's a pretty tough guy at the 205 division for the UFC. So definitely gives Singer an edge in this fight on the feet. Ground skills, again, both guys good on the ground, good submission skills. This is definitely going to be a tough fight to call. I don't see this fight going to a decision for some reason. I see somebody getting submitted here. Probably see the athlete submitting Singer, getting on top of him, maybe grounding and pounding him. He's a little bit bigger frame guy, possibly second, third round. But Singer is a tough guy. We've seen him win 2 of his 3 UFC fights, so it's not going to be an easy job for MacDonald to finish him, but he could possibly finish him with a submission or ground and pound, second or third round. On to the next fight, down to the lightweight division with Tyson Griffin against Frank Edgar from right here in New Jersey, winning his last fight against, Tyson Griffin. This fight is with Clay Guida. Sorry about that. Clay Guida, fresh off of his loss against Dean Thomas at a Fight Night card. That was a tough decision loss against Din, but Guida's a tough guy. He's fought some really good 155ers. Josh the Punk Thompson, one of those guys. He's got some good submission skills, going against a similar guy in Tyson Griffin, who I feel like I've stated, I think, about this prior. He's more of a blown-up 145er. That's where really his dominant weight division is. Fighting a bigger guy in Guida, it's going to be an interesting fight. If it goes to the ground, both guys are pretty good on the ground in terms of submissions. I think Griffin, though, is probably going to win this fight, probably by a decision, possibly a submission, but Guida also is a good submission specialist himself, so this fight is really kind of hard to call, like some of the other fights on this card are. It's going to be a tough go of it, but I think Griffin will win this fight, and it further reinforces my theory that the UFC is going to try to put in a featherweight division eventually, sometime in the near future, with guys like Edgar, Uriah Faber in the WEC, some of the guys that are now competing on the Tough 5 season, all blown up 145ers that could potentially fill a new division for the UFC. So Griffin, either decision, stoppage, second or third. On to the co-main event for this show. Forrest Griffin against Hector Sick Dog Ramirez. Last time we saw Sick Dog, he got KO'd by James Irvin. Irvin hit him, stopped, raised his hand. The ref didn't stop the fight, came in and sort of finished him off a little bit. It's kind of maybe a thing where they're friends outside of the cage, and Irvin didn't want to abuse him. Griffin, originally slated to fighting on the last pay-per-view card, didn't happen. He was supposed to be fighting Machida. I thought that was a bad matchup for him coming off the loss against Jardine. Definitely thought he would have lost against Machida, but now he's fighting against Ramirez. I think that the UFC thinks this is a more tailor-made fight for him, a guy that will make him look good, standing there, brawl with him. Ramirez is a pretty tough guy. We saw him give Irvin some fits on the feet and on the ground, and just a matter of time. I think that the UFC thinks if Griffin catches him, he'll knock him out. But this is a really a must-win for Griffin. If he loses this fight, it's definitely not going to look good on him. Lost against Jardine. Hasn't fought the most script guys in the UFC. Sinasek, we've seen what he's gone on to become. And Bill Mahood, he got demolished against Tito in that first round. Tito kind of took the second round off, won the third round. I think Cecil Peoples had that card on the head, scored the first round, a 10-8 round. So did I. It was a 29-27 win, Tito Ortiz. But I think this is definitely a must-win for Griffin. I think he needs to get away from those brawling tactics, those crazy exchanges he likes to get into, and use some of his ground techniques. I know he's working with Randy Couture, so he definitely has ground skills, and he needs to use those a little bit more to be a more well-rounded and more successful fighter. Probably wins against Ramirez, probably catches him second or third, KOs him, and goes on, get more hype. Hopefully, he'll probably be in with a bigger, more named opponent in his next time out. Now on to the main event, Rich Ace Franklin against Yushin Okami. This is definitely a fight. If Rich wins, he's going to be attempting to get his title back in Cincinnati. No doubt about it. Either Anderson Silva or Nate Marquardt if Rich wins this fight, he's getting his title shot. So it's apropos that he'd be fighting a guy that if he wins, he gets a title shot. And Yushin Okami went in there, beat Swick, who is well on his way to potentially getting a title shot himself, but he lost. Conflict of styles, Okami, a ground and pounder, a guy who likes to take it to the ground and just gain dominant position, pound you out. He has a win against Anderson Silva, but it was more of a disqualification win because Anderson Silva kicked him low. Okami couldn't continue. Rich, of course, off his loss to Anderson Silva, came back and beat up on Jason MacDonald. It looked good. I think he got the rust off, the butterflies out of his stomach, and was able to regain that confidence. And I think this is a good matchup for him. I really do. I think that Rich has underrated ground skills, really does. And we saw that with MacDonald, who was supposed to have the edge on Rich, and Rich was able to get to the ground, was able to defend his submission attempts, what few he threw at him, was able to have dominant position most of the fight, was able to pass, side control, mount, pound down on MacDonald. And I think that Rich definitely does hold an edge in the stand-up in this fight, and he will test Okami's chin at some point during this fight, and could potentially knock him out in the first or second round. We saw Swick, who's a much smaller frame guy than Franklin, rattle Okami, and I think Franklin is definitely has a weirder striking style, more wide strikes, but I think if he catches Okami, could KO him. I'm picking Rich to win this fight by a KO in the second round. Rich does have underrated ground skills, can submit you, and we saw that against Jorge Rivera and some of his prior fights. Hopefully, again, like Forrest, he goes back to being a more well-rounded fighter. and is able to want to work some submissions on the ground. Hope you guys enjoyed this segment. Hope you're checking out my videos I just posted as well as this one. Till then, you have a good one. Take care.